Welcome to Season 2 of the Workforce Situation Room, where we spotlight some of the promising and innovative solutions that address some of our most pressing workforce and economic challenges. Our mission at Workforce Solutions Borderplex is to power businesses to prosperity by empowering people with tools and opportunities to reach their potential in the workforce. I'm Bianca, your host, and I stand alongside our ladies of leadership at Workforce Solutions Borderplex with Leila Melendez, our CEO, Alma Aranda, Workforce Development Director, and Karina Castillo, our Senior Research Analyst. In this room, we all believe every situation has a solution. For today's episode, here's the situation.
At WSB, we rocked and rolled through January and wanted to take this opportunity for a fresh start to openly discuss our predictions, concerns, and visions for 2022.
Okay, so today we have several freestyle topics that we're going to talk about, and it's really more of, now that this pandemic, it's not going away, it's sticking around, and it's in different degrees of what we're used to, but because of the data that we have access to, because of the programs that we're involved in, because of the funding that we're receiving from the Department of Labor or any other departments, we kind of have an idea of what's coming up or what to anticipate in the coming year and years. So what I wanted to talk about today is kind of give us an opportunity to have this crystal ball approach to what we think is going to be happening with the workforce this year, next year, the years after, and what we can expect. And there's some pretty strong topics. And before this, we were talking a little bit about witchcraft and spiritual craziness, the woo-woo. No, hey, we're all human, right? But we were just kind of giving our insight on certain things. But this is our opportunity to do it on a professional level with projections and actually using data and the anecdotal stuff that we're exposed to. So I brought up a few topics, and really we want to talk about the future of work. We want to talk about the childcare system. And of course, obviously, we've talked about this in the past, but education is changing dramatically in so many ways. Students' approach to education is changing. Curriculums are changing. So I know that we're going to be talking about a lot of that. And then obviously we're dealing with wages and we're dealing with rising prices. I mean, I can tell you that I have that Walmart app where I kind of do my pickup for groceries, and I always have the same stuff usually. And that's just getting higher and higher and higher with my budget.
So, same list, just a different total price.
Inflation. So I guess we can start with future of work.
Sure.
And the reason I want to bring that up actually is I actually came across this report today, and it was by Fiverr. They had hired a research agency to look at statistics from the Department of Labor, from BLS, from, all types of resources, IRS as well. Mm-hmm. And BLS stands for Bureau of Labor Statistics, for those of you who don't follow that. And they were really talking about the shift of the remote workforce and pretty much how that's just taking over. But it's interesting how individuals that are doing the gig work are injecting themselves into a workforce with control of their lives and with financial control where they can call their own pricing. So that's a really interesting report. And it's also starting to take over the major metropolitan cities. But what's interesting about it is that you're seeing something with the economy happen that really hasn't happened before in terms of wages in one city are being brought in by businesses from another city on a scale that's never happened before. So if you get a job in New York, a gig job for freelancing, whether it's creative, production, even administrative, those types of things, the revenue from that New York city is coming to El Paso versus a company in El Paso is now sending the money somewhere else. So there's a lot of intermixing and collaboration going on, and we're barely even starting to see the effects of how that's going to impact the economy. But I think that's interesting. I think that's a really good way to kind of start the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you said it, we're only beginning to see, get a little bit of an insight of, and what the true picture and what the economic footprint, as we call it, is going to be. We don't know. We recently, through one of our consultants, tried to complete a remote work jobs assessment. But absolutely, at a national level, at a regional level, there's a work shift. And the expectation very early on with COVID, when there was just so much job loss and businesses were shutting down, we had actually thought it was going to really be if you remember, kind of our call out for people was get ready. While you're done, skill up, right? Get level up, get ready, because it's going to be more competitive. And I think with COVID just kind of just extending and, one variant after the other, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one of these things where workers are just in a different state of mind. The thing that kind of gets me worried still is that you still have a lot of employers making assumptions sometimes. And I don't think it's in their best interest necessarily to make some of these assumptions that people are lazy and don't want to go back to work. There was a report actually put out by the Texas labor market, and they were saying like people are working, they're just changing jobs. Mm-hmm. Something that came out recently also, still a lot of the stuff is so new. It's not necessarily syndicated or vetted data, but a little anecdotal and different reports and things like that. But you have your go-to sources. Mm-hmm. And there's a projection that 30% of people are going to shift jobs this calendar year.
Wow.
That's huge. And so I think, to your point there, people are just kind of acclimating with the situation and realizing that their quality of life is for them. And the job is just a means to get them their quality of life. For so long, our life and our identity is related to work. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the shift. So I think as employers are struggling more and more, they need to find a way to kind of make themselves attractive to employees as opportunity and quality and employers of choice and all those things that we're trying to help employers get to. Like, for example, the program that we launched.
Best places for working parents.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That's going to be really important, to identify like, is that employer family friendly? Because that's my life right now. And that first and foremost is my priority versus like, the work-life balance is a very real thing. And I think for our region, especially because our largest employer base is small employers, I know that they struggle with resources sometimes to acclimate to that. But I think even just like kind of like their internal messaging and their approach to that can help them a lot. Additionally, one of the things that we're starting to see more and more, and we saw this when we were at the Texas Workforce Commission annual conference, there was an employer out there, and it was an eye-opener for me, but I think we're seeing it now even happen where they might not necessarily hire the person based on their current skills, right? Or degrees or certifications, but they see the potential. Mm. And then they're going to try to like skill up that person. And this is, not to bring it back down to like, the services that we can provide, but it's important for the employers in the community to know that we actually have funding to level you up. So whether you're currently working and want to kind of continue working in that job, like talk to your employer, we've got things we know we have resources to do that. If you're the employer and needs to kind of upskill your current workforce to fill some of those gaps,
we'll pay for it.
We can pay for it. There's absolutely funding. And we, it's important that we utilize that type of funding in our area.
Yeah.
I think the businesses must realize that they are not only competing right now with these region employers. They have to be ensuring that they are competing with other regions, New York, other regions that they pay higher wages.
You're right.
And they see, okay, here, that's okay. I'm competing with the company in front of me. But these talent people is going to be working maybe remotely from El Paso, Texas, but working from an employer outside the region. And maybe they want flexibility also. What you said, Alma, benefits, work safety, all of the areas besides the salary, they and have the quality, to be in considering the quality.
The quality, because I think, sometimes what we see is wages aren't the only driver. We're seeing that even ourselves as an organization, as an employer. Mm-hmm. Some of the interviews that we've had, some of the recent hires, that's some of the feedback is they're not just chasing the dollar anymore. So in addition to, staying competitive with regions, it's going to be hard, if somebody can work remotely for an El Paso employer based with El Paso median wages, or work remotely for an employer in New York based on median wages in New York, that's going to be hard. But it's important, I think, where we have the advantage and we just need to capitalize on it a little bit more, is that we are a very friendly, culture-driven town, right? that kind of is our personality in El Paso. Mm-hmm. And I think if employers can highlight that, it can show some of those people that aren't just like chasing the dollar, right? That there is quality in that. So the distinction here is, I think employers are going to have to be a little bit careful of what they're asking of their employees. You might have a couple vacancies and you want your worker to stretch themselves and, look at as opportunities for growth and things like that. But the capacity is going to be really important, because that's where we're also seeing some employees saying like, I'm burnt out. I got burnt out really quick because I'm doing too many jobs for that, for people that aren't that, for vacancies. So that's going to be a really important conversation to have with employers as well.
It's a delicate balance. So what we're asking employers that are dealing with shortages, but also as a business owner, it's becoming a new responsibility to offer these benefits that are going to attract and retain these employees. And the best places for working parents, just so I can elaborate a little bit, is a national network that Workforce Solutions Borderplex joined this year. And it's really more of a messaging initiative. It's an effort to really normalize that family-friendly businesses are going to be what keeps you alive in this new way of working. And some of these policies that a family-friendly business should advocate for and actually absorb as part of their culture are things like flexibility, remote work type thing. Childcare should be at the very front of it, because it comes back to the whole quality of life. If I'm not able to have flexibility with my schedule and spend more time with my children, or be able to afford quality childcare so that I can actually go and work, things like healthcare benefits, which is a given. What else are we talking about with that? Paternal leave. Normalizing dads being able to stay home and help mom. Like, not that much because dads can get a break too, because people think maternity leave is like this vacation. Admittedly, when I had my baby girl, I'm like, yay, I'm going to have 3 months at home. No way. Was I slapped in the face when I actually had to deal with it? Like, this is anything but a vacation. So best places for working parents is actually, just kind of what we're first doing is assessing where the Borderplex stands as a region when it comes to the level of family-friendly businesses that we have. So at this point, we have an assessment out publicly where we're having businesses take a quick 3-minute assessment of how do you fare as a best place to work? And then it scores you, and all of these scores are confidential, but we're pretty much first gauging. And that's what Best Places for Working Parents is doing across all of these metropolitan regions. They're gauging all of the businesses at that region and determining, okay, this is where we stand. It's more of a let's check ourselves and let's put our money where our mouth is. If we want to be the pioneers of a positive workforce and rebuild the workforce after the pandemic, we first have to see where we stand. Once we see where we stand, then we can start implementing solutions based on everybody's situation with different regions. But it's currently a network. It's like a club that we're in, right? And all of these regions, Austin, Fort Worth, they're all over the country. We're all kind of in it together, and we're all having these conversations across the nation. And pretty much the goal is to normalize being a family-friendly business. Like, that's the norm. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you'll bankrupt yourself out of business if you're not dealing with these.
Absolutely. I think these things being data-driven, right? At our core, that's one of our values. And being transparent with the data. We've said this before, whether it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, the data is neutral, right? And so True. I think we just have to evaluate that and look at it. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is labor force participation rate versus unemployment. So it's really important, I think, for businesses in the community to understand your unemployment rate is comprised of people who are actively looking for work. And there's a period right there. I won't get into the methodology of it too much. Well, okay, 4 weeks. But you have to be actively searching for work. And you could be actively searching for work and maybe you found a part-time job. Mm-hmm. You're not necessarily counted as unemployed. So the percentage rate is a little bit of, I guess
it's a little deceiving.
It could be, right? Yeah. It might paint a more positive picture than what it really is.
Okay.
And so it's important to look at that. Although it's standard across everywhere. I mean, that's, so it's not like we're doing it that way here in the Borderplex region or in Texas. It's just, that's how it is across the nation. So there's balance there. But from a economy standpoint, I think we really need to kind of look at the participation and then who should be participating and the gaps between that. Because if we can kind of crack that code, then we know if they should be working, and it's a certain age group, right? It's between ages 24 to 55. And that's just like basic like census data. But granted, there could be a lot of reasons why they're not participating, but more and more, it's important to kind of measure. And Karina puts out this report on a monthly basis, our labor market report, that shows what the labor force is, whether it increased or decreased this month, Mm-hmm. And those are really good indicators, much more than the actual just percentage of unemployment. But we can even break it down by like areas in the city, in the region, mm-hmm. and identify. And then back to, what you were saying about the employers is, for example, even though, for that parent that is deciding to stay home, because they're worried about childcare, right, with COVID. If the employer is willing to be a little bit more flexible in the schedule or do remote work, well, then maybe that parent can still kind of continue to work. And if those businesses don't necessarily have remote opportunities, like let's just say it's
a restaurant,
right? Well, then really like having a very good flex schedule might solve that problem. And that's what makes you a friendly employer. Right. And so I think we're just going to have to kind of really come to that moment of realization, like employers are going to have to try to actively be that employer to retain and attract employees. One of the things that we're seeing a lot in the data is a turnover and early retirement. I mean, we've been talking about this silver tsunami, for a while.
Silver tsunami.
The silver tsunami.
That. And Karina has those numbers, so we'll give you a chance to talk.
Karina, if you want to kind of chime in on that, but that's a big one. And just, anecdotally, some of the conversations that, we've had with people is sometimes they're doing early retirement for, yes, COVID related, but sometimes it's to help their children's, like as grandparents, so maybe they're not necessarily in retirement age, but they're pitching in to help so that, their son or daughter can continue their career. So again, those are maybe not just like for parents, but for even the grandparents, like, because maybe the grandparents can stay and continue working. You're not losing that value, knowledge, and skill set. If we're flexible.
Karina, talk about the numbers a little bit.
Yes, I just wanted to tell you that I'm worried about the pipeline and the people that is retiring. I was looking the numbers for El Paso, Texas MSA, and there are more than 60,000 workers that are 55 years and over.
That's a lot.
And from those 60,000, 14,000 are 65 and over. So we need to prepare all the pipeline with upskilling on technical skills and also soft skills, critical thinking, strategic analysis, all of that areas that they don't think about right now, the young adults. Because we need to prepare them for the pipeline. All the teachers that are going to be retiring, I have this on the education industry. It's almost 1,000 teachers are 65 and older.
We're already facing a teacher shortage as it is.
And then who's
even
going to take
COVID,
in?
But that's just like even more so. Now looking at the retirement rates, that's really scary.
So this crystal ball, it's not even a crystal ball. Like it's imminent. We have a teacher shortage. We're dealing with 65 and older that are working that are very likely to be retiring in the next few months, or if not near years. And that leaves a big gap of open positions and potentially a lot of those in education and other positions, but 14,000 minimum, right? And that's saying positively with data. So you brought up something, and I do want to go back into education because that's a big cause for concern in terms of what we can predict, but how we can implement solutions. But you brought up a job like a restaurant job or a retail job. And this is where we kind of bring in this concept that Best Place for Working Parents is trying to bring in, the normalization of childcare becoming a community investment and not just the personal problem that everybody kind of shrugs away, because it's not a personal problem. It really is something that we all need support with as families, as parents, as moms, as dads. And this restaurant industry thing that we're currently pushing, it's almost as it's a good thing because the Service Industry Recovery Program is a program that's giving free childcare out to individuals working in the service industry. Awesome. One entire year of free service and
with no
free
parent share
childcare
of cost.
With no parent share of cost. So, and we actually just ran a story on a participant that had 3 kids who's getting her childcare covered entirely for 3 kids. Awesome. And that's a good thing. Other than just those service industry workers getting free childcare, this is kind of what I'm predicting and seeing coming up with our Best Place to Work and this program is that it is starting to become normalized. And once you start, with those industries, then other employers are really going to start seeing like, okay, if we don't buck up with this help, then the economy is going to stay
difference.
stagnant.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to share a story anecdotally. So when I was not working with workforce and I would talk to Karina once in a while, and she was like, oh, you should come work here. You should come work here. And one of the things that she had talked about, is, again, this was even pre-COVID, that they were very family friendly. At the time, my daughter had experienced mild traumatic brain injury. And so I needed to feel secure in like she's going to have appointments, she's going to have this. And Karina kept kind of saying, like, they're very friendly, they're very supportive, they're very understanding of that. And honestly, that was attractive. You're looking for things like that. You know, you want to be in an environment where you feel valued. And part of that value for me, and I think especially in our culture, part of our value is our family.
Quality of life.
Exactly. So if an employer can exemplify that, now granted, you know, for example, our CEO, Layla, you know, she's got her standards and there's work that needs to be done and things like that. But that's the balance of it. So it's still really high level, high performing organization, high standards. But I know that she has that understanding as well, should something be needed.
Makes a huge difference.
It was enough for me to apply to want to work here. I mean, like, that was one of the conversations I had with Karina. I remember that.
Yeah. And also just wanted to mention that we need to see the other side of the coin. I know you are helping the moms to have this daycare or childcare paid while they are working. Yeah. But then these childcare providers, they have a staff, and the staff is not enough for all the children, all the that we have in this region. Besides the staff, we need to encourage more individuals to go to this industry, but it's kind of difficult right now because the pay for a childcare worker is like $8.50 an hour. And that's true. It's not attractive. Because there has to be a balance between, okay, we are helping these mothers, these parents, but we need to work with these health employers to take care of these children.
You know, when we talk about COVID silver linings, you know, we have to be careful and sensitive as we're saying that. But really, I do believe that this is a silver lining. I think to Karina's point, we had kind of taken advantage of the childcare industry and the childcare worker, right? Just, it's always been there. It's one of those things, like you said, it's a personal problem. Like, that's you're dealing with childcare, Bianca.
You chose to have kids.
Yeah, you go figure it out. I just need you to come to work at this time. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. But I think what COVID revealed is how dependent we are as an economy, as a society, as a community on the childcare system. Yeah. And it's one of those things where, I mean, if you think about it, like, you just don't get more important than that. Like, somebody literally taking care of your child, you know, for hours at a time, right? Yeah. So
educating them too.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that goes with it. So I think there's a lot of resources now. I think the spotlight was focused on childcare industry. We realized that there's a lot of cracks in the system, in the industry itself. And so I think at the federal level, at the state level, and at our local level, there is a lot of support. So, you know, if there's any childcare providers that are interested, or people who are interested in going into childcare, you know, licensed care, home care, all those things, like, there's a lot of resources to help you scale up. And then the big picture plan, again, federal, state, local, is to kind of really elevate wages, as, you know, for the entire industry. Knowing, though, of course, that could potentially make childcare more expensive for parents, but there's things in the works. So, like, in the crystal ball, I really do think that there's going to be a balance of, as Karina said, looking at both sides of the coin. You know, in future, it's a lot of things kind of happening all at once. So it feels a little bit wonky and like, where's the solution? It's coming. But the positive spin on that is that at least we're looking at it, you know, and people realize, so there are resources and time being dedicated to solve the childcare problem as an industry as a whole.
And I'm glad you brought up the issue of wages with childcare, because considering how important childcare is, how dependent the economy is on childcare, it's one of the least paid in comparison even to our living wage here in the Borderplex. The living wage here is $14.39 an hour. That's the wages you need to make as a 3-member household, 2 parents, 2 adults, 1 child, to be able to sustain a satisfactory quality of life where you can pay all of your expenses and not have to rely on any kind of welfare type government subsidy. So when you talk about $8.50 an hour, that's a really big contrast. That's just $1 over minimum wage. And don't even get me started about minimum wage comparisons. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that there are things in the works, because it's like we do want to support it. We do see the importance of it. But at the same time, this has to kind of follow through with bringing that prestige, bringing that dollar. So let's just say this year, at the very least, even with just the Service Industry Recovery Act, we're acting. And this year, we're involved in a national study to ensure that we know where we're at and how to move forward. Another thing I want to get into, though, when you were talking about education, right? Education and early childhood education, but education is kind of also something to be talking about and what's happening with it now. We're kind of in this really weird limbo state. And I'm hearing this anecdotally just from close friends, relatives that are in the education industry, but behaviorally where everyone's at, both teachers and students, and where it's going. I mean, that's the beginning, but what's going to happen to the workforce with the students that are currently going through these issues and trying to adapt to the COVID situation, the pandemic situation, and what's going to happen to our workforce? So we're talking about, it's like, sorry, not to be doomsday or anything, but we're talking about the retirees about to retire. So we're talking thousands of people getting ready to leave the workforce. But then those that are starting to come in are individuals that unfortunately lost a lot during the pandemic. So what are we seeing on the educational level, and how do we see it improving, if at all?
So I'm glad you framed it that way, because there's been a gap for as long as I can remember, right? In working with Karina with research, when I started with WSB, like we've always talked about the middle skills gap and the soft skills gap and the actual hard skills gap and foundational skills.
So,
like
so
all
really
of that, right?
quick, in a nutshell, middle, soft, and hard. Just do a quick definition of what those each mean.
So the middle skills gap, when we talk about that, that's actually related to occupations.
Okay.
There's a lot of middle skill. So it's not like your high level occupations where it takes like years of study and licenses and, degrees and stuff like that. It's, in a nutshell, to give you an example, it's your plumber.
Okay.
It's your carpenter. There's a gap where you see less and less of those occupations, although they pay really, really well. I mean, we're talking like very well. Mm-hmm. And because there's a gap, those services are going to get even more expensive. So that really kind of trickles into all sorts of stuff. And we could probably have a discussion just on that, on the impact of the supply and demand. Of what that does. But that's what I'm talking about, middle skills.
So middle.
When we talk about soft skills, foundational skills, like Karina was saying, those are your skills like the teamwork, the critical thinking, the analyses. This is feedback that our employers saying like, I've got so-and-so, yes, they have a degree, but they're not really good at teamwork or critical thinking or these things. And those can be big determinants of how successful the person can feel in their job and how successful they can actually be a contributor to the job itself, the employer. Mm-hmm. And of course, your hard skills are actually, they're like, we look at data and say like, okay, these job postings are asking for this type of certification, the technical stuff. Yes. Thank you. So those are all the things that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. What's really important right now, if we break it down to like the current high school students, right? The pipeline that you were referring to, because of COVID, and because they were online, and I mean, schools did what they could do. Teachers did as much as they could do. We even had a program where we were helping teachers because, teachers were running COVID tests on students. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it was just that kind of crazy. So we did a segment earlier last year with feedback from students where they felt disengaged. Yeah. I think some of the aftermath, and I don't think we're starting to see that again, referencing your crystal ball, but we're starting to see more students are opting to drop out. And honestly, this is probably one of my biggest concerns right now in the scope of work that we do, because they're trying to drop out and get their GED, and either they're going to go down the pathway of post-secondary or they're going to go down the pathway of just finding a job. But as hard as high school is, right? We can kind of remember and all those things. There's so much that comes into that, the socialization, the interactions of having that teacher talk a little bit about, those foundational skills, the opportunities in CTE programs. Our high schools have wonderful technical skills programs for free for high school students right now. And they're very much attuned to like current labor market demands. Those resources are free. And if we start seeing the trend kind of continue, there's going to be, there's more and more kids dropping out and miss opportunities because they're going for the GED right away, right? The shortcut.
Why are they doing that, do you think?
I think, again, all anecdotal and just talking to some of the school districts and a little bit of feedback for some of the students, like they just don't want to be in a classroom anymore. Like they just don't see the value of spending another whatever semester year in the classroom when they feel that they can go get their GED right now. So I'm glad that they're getting their GED. Those are the ones that we're getting, information from. But then I also think the disconnected youth, right? The ones that aren't going to try to get their GED, that are just like, I'm out of here because I need
to work. I need to,
right.
For my
so
family.
they might, to Karina's point, they might need to find a job right now. But if they're not prepared well enough, I'm not sure how we're going to find them to help them advance to keep going, right? So again, this is where, back to the employers, asking the employers, use our resources, because if you do have those people working for you, we have ways to help you and your company, but also help the individual skill up.
And that's with training and education.
And we need to rescue these students. I was looking at the school enrollment.
It's a good word.
Because
project. I like it.
Yes.
Rescue education.
I was looking from the 2019-20 to 2021, more than 8,000 students dropped. They didn't enroll.
From kindergarten to high school?
Yes, from kindergarten to high school. That's why we need to make sure they come back and they upskill, they get trained, because if not, they will be all their life gaining the minimum wage, and they are not going to have a quality of life. That's why we need to work on that.
What's really interesting here, though, and again, just kind of looking at what's happening and trying to, based on evidence, right, come up with some good projections, is we're hearing back already from the school districts, private schools, post-secondary schools, their enrollment rates are lower. And that's not good, as a system itself, right, education system. But at the same time, for example, we were talking to somebody with Microsoft from LinkedIn Learning at their national level, and they had, like a 200 or 300% increase in users just in 1 year. Your non-traditional education systems is changing everything. And I think this is kind of like the call out for our education system is we need to just kind of come to qualms with education systems are changing. People are looking for something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And the traditional semester-based stuff or, 1 year, whatever. Even quite honestly, I don't have the solution, but I'm just saying we're starting to see the demand. So even on our side with individuals looking for training, short-term in our world is less than
6 months.
Less than 6 months. That's short-term. Short-term for the job seeker right now, you're talking 6 weeks. Night and day differences. When we're promoting, we've got short-term training. Hey, 6 months, you can get the start. In their mind, they're thinking, can I get it in 6 weeks? Because even 12 weeks is a little bit too long.
Yeah, I need a paycheck.
And some businesses and platforms are finding that that's an opportunity for them. So they're redeveloping, and that could be self-paced or, go as fast as hard as you can, or it's not always, instructor-led, maybe hybrid. All of those things are really going to have an impact. And it's trickling into even our traditional K-12 systems.
Mm-hmm. Predicting the shift in education. Right now what we're dealing with is completing on our second year of this weird, crazy pandemic situation. Impacts have been behavioral for students. Apathy is something that I'm hearing a lot about, and just struggling to get back into it. Kind of like us, ourselves, just struggling to kind of, not every day, but maintain and not lose our minds. And if we're dealing with that, we're obviously seeing disengagement, but they're also losing a lot of what they're supposed to be learning. They're not retaining what the teacher's teaching oftentimes. So I feel like these gaps that you mentioned earlier, they're there, but they're widening. So I want to predict, and not even predict, I just want to wish, can we make a wish on the crystal ball, that this workforce development initiative that we take on as a nonprofit, that we start integrating that into the education system, that partnership especially at least in this phase, while these students adapt and this, the changes happen in the education system that you're talking about. I think at this point, in order to salvage what we have with those students that have lost that quality and their fate isn't great in terms of workforce development, we need to jump in with our capes and we need to implement teaching them those skills gaps. And I don't know how we do that. I know that we've done a couple things here and there, but I see that as an opportunity for us to jump in, implement what we do for adults and job seekers with students. And I know the Grind Talk thing's been really good, and that I think that needs to kind of take priority, at least to rescue. And we're talking about those disconnected youth that you mentioned. You have a lot of dropouts, high school dropouts. But as far as the ones that are choosing the shortcut to get a GED, we could talk to those individuals, right?
We actually have a program right now that we're piloting to really kind of get in there and like be with them. I think sometimes in our systems, especially, quasi-government bureaucratic processes, we have to abide by certain regulations because of our funding sources and things like that. But we have to really be open and agile and get as creative as we can to go to them because they're not necessarily coming to us, right? So because we're kind of foreseeing what's going to happen down the pipeline, like how do we help this individual now? So that they can help themselves, they can contribute to society, all of those things that we want to do, in the realms of economic development. So we're actually going to be piloting where we're going to be going quite often into these programs where they're getting their GEDs and talking to them about like, yes, great, you're getting your GED, but guess what? We also have this, XYZ.
And you're going to need it.
And presenting options, right? And presenting them options too, and make it easy for them to engage. Because, when we talk about disconnected youth or like kids just like, maybe even those GEDs are just kind of opting out saying like, I'm done. Like I'm, and not wanting to do the traditional stuff. Yeah. We have to be very careful in our approach that it doesn't feel like we're trying to give them the same thing, the same, feed in the same story. Especially right now, because something that we also have to kind of look at, and the data gets more and more compelling. Every time I look at it, the gig workers, the freelance work, all those things are big game changers. Like,
oh, wow. Yeah.
That's huge. A huge one.
You know what they're averaging per hour in the $234 billion industry? Just in 2020, it went up $5 billion. $5 billion more dollars were reported to the IRS in remote work. And in gig work, in the Upworks, the freelance, all of those, the Fivers of the world. And the average gig worker is working 32 hours a week, making $28 an hour, average, with being able to make their own hours, with being able to hang out and do what they need and not working the traditional 40-hour 8 to 5 minimum wage job, or not even just minimum wage, but lower wage job. So that's a huge competition.
I saw an interview. There was a lady in the TV, and she said, I used to work in a restaurant. Mm-hmm. I got so tired, and I opened my fitness online, and I'm getting a lot of money. She's getting it. Yeah. Like she's not returning to the restaurant to work.
And she's fit.
And she's getting a lot of money.
Yeah. They're doing that.
And that's what I'm saying. Like people are finding a way to capitalize on their passions and strengths. It goes all back to the quality of life.
But this is beautiful though. It's not bad.
It's not bad.
It's forcing the economy and businesses to, hey, your model's not going to work anymore, which sorry that the suffering's happening, but things kind of have to happen this way in order for a new buildup.
Honestly, and even our expectations as consumers, right? When we talk about the whole CX and our customer experience, I'm going to throw my dad under the bus here. So we had gone to a restaurant, and my dad is one of those, like, he doesn't like to ask for somebody to come and refill. The server should be doing that like automatic. A good server knows to refill his cup, his glass, whatever, right? It was a large table. We had gone out for his birthday, but he started to get impatient with the server. And you could tell there was a shortage. This was
especially now.
Mm-hmm. And I could see him kind of getting frustrated. And he was about to say something, not ugly. By no means like in an ugly way, but he did want to kind of make a comment to the server, like, because he had asked twice for something and she forgot. It was that. Granted, it impacted his meal. Yes, it did, but I had to stop him. I was like, "Don't. They're short." I said, "She's trying. It's not like she's not trying to do a good job. Yeah. She is." And even as I said it, I realized as a consumer, we have to realize what we're contributing to that. Like that server, right, that worked at a restaurant. Like, are we treating them correctly? Are we being mindful? Are we being respectful? They are short. These businesses are short. How are we reacting to these workers, and how did we treat them before? And giving them value. So now that there's a shortage, you've got all these different type of discussions going on. But I mean, even from the customer experience, it's important to kind of realize
well,
that.
Yeah, because then you're going to end up with no restaurants. And I don't think anybody wants that.
Right? We are here in this region service industry. And
yeah, like, do you want the service? And maybe that's what has to happen. Maybe that's what has to happen, where they just kind of like run them down to the ground and they're like, screw this. We're not serving you rude people anymore. Pour your own water. And that's it. What happens then? Things kind of have to fall apart.
Maybe we're going to be increasing with this, we're going to be maybe mandatory to increase the occupations in the upper wage quartiles. And as it is forcing us to go in another route.
I think it's beautiful, all of it. I think the quality of life, I mean, yes, we're seeing some strains here and there, but I have also seen the flowering of the quality of people spending more time with their families. And yes, they're living on less means. They're cutting corners where they have to, but that's, spending time with your family, that's priceless. And being able to, I mean, even the grandparents that are quitting and retiring early so that they can take care of their grandkids to help their kids. I bet you that's a really fun, happy, joyful dinner that they're having, and the recipes, the food that they don't even have to go to a restaurant because it's that good. But I think it's good. Silver lining, I would call that gold. It's not just silver. But what is happening that I'm seeing, and I just talked with Denise, our business services manager from our business services unit, we are seeing really, really drastic increases in wages for the service industry in restaurants. Like, I can't remember the specific restaurants, but I'm talking fast food drive-through jobs, $18 an hour, $15 an hour starting. That's double the minimum wage all over El Paso. Chuck too. He's talking to different fast food restaurants, just
there was
minimum.
I mean, for me, there was a conversation that I had with one of our local CTE directors, and we were talking about emergency medical technicians, right? Paramedics. Oh. And one of the things that we had talked about was, why it's not on our target occupations list if we have a shortage of EMT workers. And sure enough, the wages, the entry-level wage was less than $10 an hour. And I shared with him at Taco Cabana, they were offering a sign-on bonus. And I think the wages were like much, much significantly higher. And when you think of like the level of work and commitment and stress, and even the training cost to be an EMT and the outcome of that, right? Like your own return on investment.
No business sense.
Yeah, and so as a whole, things that we have taken for granted for years, for decades, we're going to have a real conversation. Just like what's happening with childcare, we're going to have the same thing
with other occupations,
with other industries. One of the things that I'm very worried about, I mean, and this is a very good paying industry, there's a lot of demand, is healthcare. Yeah. And to your point, not that I want to be doom and gloom, or anything like that. But for me right now, when we're looking at the shortages and the increase, we're already short in the region on healthcare workers, hugely disproportionate access to healthcare when you look at the ratios and things like that across several occupations. But now with the onset of COVID, and things like that, it's just even more so. So yeah, there's, as far as the work that we have to do, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to be focusing on. But even with that, there's also like, I guess on a positive note, there's also really great opportunities. Like, so for example, one of the things that we're working on right now, our region is looking at growing our aerospace and defense and biomedical. And those are really great jobs. Those are really great jobs also. A lot of opportunities, and those can be huge game changers for our community. In fact, UTEP was just awarded phase 1 of the very highly competitive Build Back Better grant. If we're able to move forward on that, we could do it even sooner. But you've got some really committed people in the area that are really trying to do as best as they can to level up our community as a whole, and workforce is there to support.
That's awesome. It feels like the industries that are feeling the most pressure right now, when you're talking healthcare particularly, even the restaurant industry, they're feeling the most pressure because they're the ones that need the most recalibration in terms of wages, but also in terms of how we treat people. And I mean, the hospitals are seeing the shortage because they're overworked, they're overwhelmed, they're dealing with the pandemic for 2 years, and there's a lot of tension in that environment. But we see it with education. The teacher shortage is happening there. All of those systems, they do need to fall apart. frankly. They need to fall apart to rebuild.
I mean, manufacturing itself, and
I don't mean like complete doom fall apart. I'm saying
it was on a downslope, but they've changed it up right now. It's advanced manufacturing, and there's a resurgence with that, and those are really great opportunities. So yes, very much to your point, some of these industries, it's just, we have to take a hard look and help them recalibrate as quickly as possible. And they can do it, they absolutely can do it. And there's resources allocated to help them get there, but you have to kind of face the data, right? And honestly, you have to look at your competition and not just your regional competition, not even just your competition within the same industry, because people are switching, right?
Pivoting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any background? Not specific data, Karina, but in terms of that pivot, because I find myself responding to media often about this, like, why aren't there workers in the service industry? Why are there so many shortages? Why are these signs up at the door? Please be patient with us. You're seeing that all over the place, right? I had to really calm the sentiment that people were just lazy living off of unemployment. Like that was, and I had to be very, of course, there are going to be some people doing that, but the majority of these people didn't stop working, actually. They leveled up. They took our advice. They went to work. Sorry. But do we know, do we have any data yet, Karina, on where some of these pivots happen? And if not, can we guess where we think a lot of them went?
The tech itself and different levels of customer service, like the call centers, so you have customer service experience maybe at a restaurant. Mm-hmm. How much of a jump is it to go into a call center that's offering tech support? But I'll let Karina speak to some of the
right insights. Now, and you're asking me about we have any data, hard data. We don't or right anecdotal. Now, but we are planning or we're doing starting a research of all those that file a claim.
Okay.
That receive unemployment, where they were working before and now where they are. This is, once I have the data, we can have another conversation and see, because we're saying now they are changing priorities. Now I want, instead of working for the service industry in a restaurant, maybe I'm going to work in another industry that pays me more and there is more flexibility. But that's where we are.
Well, that's good to know. So our crystal ball doesn't look too doomsday-ish, but if we could have a wishing well, I'm being so cheesy. Sorry, I just came up with that last minute. But what would be something that you would hope for to see come out of our efforts this year? And this fiscal year and the coming year. And I'm throwing a curveball at the girls right now because I want to hear what comes off the top of your head. Like that's I think that's the most important. What's the immediate thing? What's the first thing you want to see?
Honestly, I know there's funding and I talk about there's a lot of resources, but just access to kind of really amplify that and get more people that traditionally wouldn't qualify and just make it easier. So in a nutshell, my wishing well wish
here's your coin
would be to just align all of our resources and efforts and make it just really accessible, because I think that's what the people that we're trying to reach out is looking for. So just more funding with less restrictions.
Nice. ¿Y tú, Karina?
Access to resources, all the low income, or maybe they are not maybe low income, they're middle skills.
Right.
They have maybe some college and they are earning minimum wage. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can help them and then for them to get upskilled and then train and then get better wages. That's what we are expecting to do this year, to upskill all the workers that they're in the middle skills.
I'm with both of you. And then they're similar, right? We want more for our patrons, for our customers, and for the community as a whole. And I'm the same. As far as my department goes, when it comes to communication, one thing I really wish for is to have as many people realize that we have in this community that they have this right. That they all have this right. It's not just, this is where I'm at, and a settling of this is just where I ended up, but everybody does have the right to have a life of abundance, to have a life of good wages, a quality of life where they can actually find joy and on a daily basis. And work is just, work is part of life, but it's not the identity and it doesn't associate with struggle to survive. Removing the struggle out of living is what I wish we could do. And so, and letting everybody know, as many people sounding the loudest bullhorn out there for me and for everyone to hear that you can have this, you can have a good life. And it's not because the cards you were dealt, like change the cards and you can do that. And we can help you. That's my wish, that 90% more people hear that message, that everybody has access to that. And that's where all that funding and everything, so the resources are plentiful through workforce and through what we're seeing. And we just need to let more people know that we're here.
If I can just say one more thing, I just thought of this is, I think something that's going to be really important is, in the work that we do, we serve everybody from the college student to the employer to, at all sorts of levels, for somebody who's participating, because they're receiving some sort of government assistance and, they're directed to come to our center. So it's a very diverse population. In that, of course, it's also a population that sometimes is underserved and with opportunities. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about like people coming out of the justice system, people with disabilities. I'm hoping that also, if I could throw in another coin into the wishing well, that employers really kind of take advantage of the resources and consider those populations as well when scaling up your older veterans, right? Not just the transitioning soldiers, things like that. There's a lot of opportunity there, and there's a lot of people who are just asking for a chance. And it's important for employers to know that the resources that come with that are quite vast, from work opportunity tax credits to fidelity bonding, all those things that can help incentivize an employer to give those populations an opportunity as well. And that can also kind of fill some of those gaps.
True.
That they're experiencing right now.
There's abundance in the funding, abundance in the potential wages, and abundance in the candidates. It's just a matter of redistributing things.
It's connecting the dots.
Yeah, it's all there.
Aligning all the resources.
And that's our job, right?
That's what we do.
So just real quick before we say goodbye, the populations we serve that Alma was mentioning are obviously your general population, job seekers, and of course all of the businesses in the Borderplex, but migrant seasonal farm workers, military veterans, transitioning soldiers, their spouses, former or incarcerated or transitioning out.
Displaced homemaker. Like people who have been unemployed for a long time, long-term unemployed individuals.
Everyone.
Literally there's
everybody.
College students that are like maybe have exhausted their Pell grants.
Yeah.
Before they
we'll
stop
pay for
out,
the rest of your,
we can help you. We can help you. You know what I mean? College students who need to work in their field of study, we can help you. Things like that. So it's quite vast.
Yeah, really. All the answers are there. We're just here to
It's good stuff that we're doing. It really is. I definitely hope that, like you said, people hear more about it and spread that message.
I'll just scream a little bit louder.
We do.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
What are your predictions for the rest of the year when it comes to the workforce and economy? We're eager to hear your feedback. Find us on Twitter and LinkedIn and let it out. The best way to serve the community is to get real and understand the pulse of the Borderplex. Till next month, thanks for listening.